We are going to call this meeting to order now. It is 6:30 p.m. on October 20, 2022, and this meeting is a public meeting of the City of Portland Police Accountability Commission. Welcome, everyone. We're very excited. Thank you for being here. Let's start. If the Spanish, I don't know if the Spanish interpreters are here, I can also. Okay. Gaby.
Sí, hello. Hola.
Hola, Gaby. ¿Podrías tú dar la interpretación en español?
Sí.
Muchas gracias.
Espera, solo dame un momentito. Voy a...
Sí, no te preocupes. Bienvenida, Gaby. Gracias.
Sí. Ok. Esta cita es pública. Es una cita pública y está sujeta a la ley de Oregon y la ciudad de Portland y las reglas administrativas, y va a ser grabada. Cuando accediendo el botón de español y para la interpretación en español, vas a ver un botón de que diga español y para que te dé el audio y la interpretación en español. Solo vayan a donde dice Language Interpretation o idioma, donde dice interpretación de idioma, en los controles, en el botón, y ahí en la pantalla uno puede seleccionar español.
Muchas gracias, Gaby. The city also offers ASL interpretation. Please pin their video feed to see their interpretation throughout the meeting. Finally, the closed captioning is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance. But please note that this is an automatic captioning services and is always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to a public meeting notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for other access assistance, including interpretation into other languages. This meeting is a public meeting subject to City of Portland Administrative Code and Oregon State Law and is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using Zoom's Q&A feature. As the commissioners are presenting and or discussing things, if attendees have questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A. We hope to use this feature to help guide our conversation during the meeting and future meetings and agenda topics. We'd like to be clear that not all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered, both the questions and answer will be visible to you, and you will become part of the meeting record. To access this feature, just click on Q&A icon in the middle of your screen. Now I will pass it to one of our co-chairs to talk about the land acknowledgement. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Faith Aiken. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm looking forward to acknowledging our land acknowledgement this evening. So want to acknowledge that the city has asked for a moratorium on land acknowledgements, but the co-chairs believe that some form of land acknowledgement should continue. We'd like to recognize the limits of any land acknowledgement and the harm that can be done by an inadequate or disrespectful land acknowledgement. We are working to find a respectful way to continue to center Indigenous voices. And with that, I'd like to take a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair Faith. Thank you very much. Now I will ask the whoever's doing the slides to put the community agreements to share for all of us, please. And I always forget to introduce myself. My name is Victoria Lara. I'm one of the facilitators, and with me, I have the honor and privilege to serve and work with Ayomide and with Dr. Moses. We are happy to be here. Thank you. I will ask everyone to read the community agreements. There is 2 pages, and reflect on it, not just read it, and make sure we follow these community agreements for our discussion. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. If I can ask everyone that agree to follow these community agreements today and our conversation, please show me their hands or the thumbs up. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, now I'm gonna pass it to the co-chairs.
Good evening. As we know, the commission is currently in the fact-finding phase of our work, which will end when all 3 of the outcome documents are approved. It includes hearing from key stakeholders, identifying barriers to accountability in Portland presently, and examining systems of accountability from other jurisdictions. It also includes increased community engagement work. Future phases of work will develop the parameters for the new police accountability system before the commission presents that to City Council in 2023 for their consideration of approval. This meeting is expected to be the last meeting of the fact-finding phase. Everything is still a little tentative, so we are talking about upcoming meetings based on that assumption. The commission will hold a private community building session next Monday. The next public meeting of the PAC is a full commission meeting on Thursday, October 27th, with the authors of the charter amendment, section 210 of the charter. There will be no meeting on Monday, October 31st. The PAC will hold a listening session or other community engagement event on November 3rd.
Thank you.
I think we're moving to slide 7.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. This slide is the current project plan for the fact-finding phase of our work. It's not the agendas and it is updated regularly. This slide is for members of the public to be able to understand how the commission gets from now through the end of the phase, which focuses on identifying areas of agreement among commission members as to barriers of accountability in our current system, best practices from Portland and other jurisdictions, and suggestions to consider from experts, as well as taking public comment and meeting with key stakeholders. Today's meeting is the blue box with the purple border in the upper right part of the screen. This slide shows the outcome documents for the fact-finding phase. The full commission has approved the second and third document. The first document on practices in other jurisdictions was referred to the full commission last Thursday, October 13th by the subcommittee on research, and part was discussed on Monday, October 17th. Today's meeting agenda has one primary purpose: finishing that document, the draft areas of agreement on best practices and practices to avoid from other jurisdictions. It is expected that the PAC will make a formal decision today on this document. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm gonna pass it to Ayomide. She will be giving us the equity training. Thank you, Ayomide.
Thank you, Victoria. First, I would just like to take a moment for everybody to put their pronouns in the land they were born in the chat. Just to kind of add some community bonding. And let me get the slides up. Just give me a moment. I'll put this link in the chat. So I'd like to just start off by saying to everyone that doing this kind of work can bring up discomfort for people. And it's important for everybody to breathe while doing this work, because we all need to stay alive and functioning well within our minds. So I like to have people take in a deep breath, actually a little bit more than, or it says count to 10 before you speak. That's one that's good. But for the breathing part, I would say do inhale for 7 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, and exhale for 7 seconds as a practice to ground us. So I'm going to have us do that as a group before we get into the meat of our time together. So let's see, you guys, it's really hard. Okay, so first, take a deep breath in. 7 seconds, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then exhale for 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And do it one more time on your own timing. Okay. So our goals of today are to go through discussing the racial handbook, the racial healing handbook, the introduction, chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. We'll first start off with this introduction, and I would love to have a member volunteer to read this page. Jay, thank you. Can you please read this?
Sure. Introduction. What is racism? Unearned privileges granted by society because of a person's race. Levels of racism. Culture. Norms, values, biases, stereotypes, beliefs. Systems. Laws, education, transportation, health, religion, nonprofit, capitalism, etc. Institutions. Schools, nonprofits, for-profits, etc. Individual/interpersonal. You, families, work relationships, etc.
Thank you. So my clarifying question for y'all is, where do the norms of the commission come from? So as we're thinking about, all these systems, where do the norms of our commission come from? I can't see everybody because I'm screen sharing. So please use your reaction thing to raise your hand so I can see it in the chat.
And I will help you, Ayomide. I can see everybody.
Yeah, I can't see. I see that 2 participants have raised their hands. Do you know who did first?
Yes, Lovisa and then Faith.
Okay, we'll start with Lavisa, since we've heard the voice of Faith already. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, Lavisa Lloyd. I use she, her pronouns. The norms of the commission come from all of these places. They come from all of us as individuals who bring our culture and our lived experience, and also all the conditioning of all the cultures and institutions that we've been through. Yeah, and they're kind of they're reflected, or maybe refracted is a better word, through us, and then they show up here. But I would love to hear other people's interpretations also.
Thank you, Lavisa. Commissioner Faith?
Yeah, we are following public meeting law. So I think a lot of the ways which we interact with one another and the norms that have been created in this commission are based around what we've seen in the city of Portland. And, we literally have a city attorney that holds us to how we interact with one another and how we make decisions. So I think the institution, the city of Portland, as city government, creates a lot of the norms in how we interact with one another in this space.
Anyone else?
If I can say something, Ayomide, I also think that our own lack of knowledge or empathy, or experiences of others, plus the stereotypes that running in this system and what we hear also creates our own notions of what the norms are based on our own experiences instead of learning or understanding or asking about the experiences of others that are different than us.
Thank you, Victoria. Commissioner Charlie.
Hi, Commissioner Charlie Michelle Wesley, she, her pronouns, tribal member of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. I was born here in the Northwest on indigenous land of the many Northwest tribes along the Columbia and Willamette River. And my first thought was what I feel and experience on the commission is forced colonialism from many centuries of what I like to call the invaders of our land. And it's all reflected in all the information that has been provided to us by the council.
Thank you, Commissioner Charlie. We'll go take one more. Commissioner Sophia.
Yes, I wanted to ask you to state your question one more time for me so that I feel like I answer it appropriately.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
The question that I asked was, what do the norms of the commission, where do the norms of the commission come from?
So just to add to what some of the others have also said, I do believe that they're I use the word colonial, but you know, the white cultural I'm trying to find the right word, norms. I think we accept those in general because we are here in the US, and that's the predominant here. And any minority, you know, tries to fit in with these. And I think there's a lot that gets missing because cultural differences mean we think differently. As you said, we have different ideas, different norms, different understandings. And I think when this commission was put together, they were trying to make sure we have representation from other groups, but at the same time, that white cultural norm still dominates, and how this thing was set up and how a lot of people perceive what should be done on the commission. So that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia, Commissioner Sophia. So I will, it sounds to me that there's a lot of, there are a lot of things that were said here. One, that meetings law is one way that this commission's norms have been crafted. The fact that folks have been together or have been picked from different groups on purpose is also another element that crafts the norms of this commission, and also the overall overarching culture of whiteness because we are in the United States, and the norms, the social norms of colonialists and the constructed racial group of white people are reflected every day. I just would like to point out that white people get to see their societal values reflected back at them continuously, and it does reflect and influence the people of color also in the room. And as well as the white people in the room and how they view their position in doing things. So something to chew on and think about. I'll go on to our next slide. Just give me a moment. Knowing your racial identity, or know your racial identity, a construct developed over time in relationship with others, can be negative can be positive or negative, always reinforced by stereotypes, beliefs, norms, values that hold privileges in place. So can anyone else give me an example? Can someone give me an example of their racial identity and a positive and negative, positive or negative reinforcement? Commissioner Jay.
Well, I identify as Black. And positive, something that's positively associated. So I'm Black and Jamaican ethnicity wise, and Jamaicans have a reputation of being very hardworking and very laid back and easy to get along. And on the flip side of that is Black people in general, but also Jamaicans, are heavily criminalized and associated with wrongdoing, especially, within law enforcement. So yeah, just 2 examples.
Thank you, Commissioner Jay. Can I ask you to send it to the next person? So you get to choose.
Who should I choose? I'm going to choose. I'll choose Faith.
My racialized identity, I am biracial, Korean, and I have a white dad. And some positive stereotypes. I would say model minority stereotypes show up in a lot of spaces around the way people think about Asians. And I don't know that that's positive, but I am good at math. So there is often, people assume that, and it is true, but negative stereotypes are often around immigration and Asians taking jobs or keeping to themselves or only valuing their own culture. There's a lot of anti-Blackness that exists in the Asian community. Yeah, those are some of my racialized identities.
Thank you, Commissioner Faith.
Yeah, I want to make sure before I call on someone that, okay, no more calling on people.
You don't have to call on.
Okay, cool.
You are good to go. No, because actually I was going to ask for Victoria, facilitator Victoria, to maybe share a story.
Yes, of course. I mean, I will say for a change, of course, it's similar here, the experience that they have been shared, but for Mexico too, we are racist against indigenous, but also in Chihuahua, where I'm from, there is a lot of German and French descendants, and there is a lot of people that look white, and they have always definitely the stereotypes that they are prefer for jobs and interviews, and also whiteness is related to, it can be Latinos white passing or Mexicans white passing, and they're related to success or more education than the person for the color. And that's the stereotypes that you can see on TV, on the media, or everywhere, that the people who has blue eyes or green eyes or looks whiter has much more opportunities than somebody that's brown. Mhm.
Thank you, Victoria. So, as you can see on this chart, racial identity development goes through many steps, and it goes through different steps for different types of people. And my question for y'all is, in this middle section here, has to do with this middle section here with immersion, resistance, and immersion and retreat. My question for y'all is, how are these expressions of identity related to each other when dealing with racial development with people of color and with white people? And if you need me to put the chart back up, I will.
Could you put the chart back up for just a second? Sorry, I'm not that fast a reader.
Absolutely.
Ayumide,
Yep.
can you give me a definition of immersion and immersion?
Yes. Yep,
Thank you
absolutely.
so much.
Yep.
Thank you.
So immersion, so that would be like the first step here for people of color, is a process of entering. So entering of a thought, entering the idea that you have like a racial identity. And in this particular situation, it's not in a positive light because of the overall arching element of white supremacy. And immersion is the process of exiting. So removing yourself from that, I would say, that label, and going more into identifying with or relating to people that are like you or like-minded. Ways of the part of ways people express that is they hang out with more people of color and surround themselves with more education about their culture. And with immersion is the opposite. They start noticing all the white supremacy that is around them. They might shy themselves away from white people or white institutions. So those are two examples. Thank you, Dr. Moses, for that question.
Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Any takers on my question? Remember, this conversation is more for you than for me. So please speak up and speak out. I'm here to prompt you. So Commissioner Sophia?
Yes, can you ask the question one more time? And thank you.
So in terms of immersion and resistance, and I'll put the chart back up so you can see where they correlate. With immersion and resistance, these two things are happening at the same time. And immersion and retreat, these two things are happening at the same time when people are developing a racial identity that's focused towards healing racial traumas. How are these expressions of identity related?
I just wanted, speak for myself and to to mention a book that an author that has a book they have talked about. It's called You Talk Like a White Girl. I don't know if anybody's seen or heard about that book, but I really identified with that. In this case, she was Mexican. I think she was Mexican descent. And she was even undocumented at a point. But you know, the immersion, you know, you try to assimilate, you try to be accepted. And there's this, it's kind of delusional, and it's what she was saying. It's like you're deluded to think that anybody will ever accept you. And then you go to this point where you realize it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how much education you have. It doesn't matter what your speech is. It doesn't matter how much you try to assimilate. There are always going to be folks who try to put you back and say, no, you are less than because your color or whatever it is. The expectations of you just by looking at you saying, oh, you don't know what you're talking about because you're brown or you're black, you know, in my case. I do identify as black, but I am multiracial. But when anyone looks at me, the first thing they see is my black skin. And that's all that matters to them. So my identity, you know, I've gone through those phases where, you know, I've tried, and then I say, oh, I don't really care. They're not going to accept me anyway. And then I get back to the point where, you know, I say, I am who I am, you know. So I've arrived at who I am. You can like me or dislike me because of things I can't control. But I'm looking at you as a person, and no matter how you look at me. So that's kind of where I've been in that little process. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I'm going to ask if you can pass it to one other person before we start winding down the session.
Give me a second so I can get my screen back up full.
Oh,
Unless
no,
Jay
I
wants
see.
to go.
I actually see Jay.
Okay.
Commissioner Jay has their hand up.
Forgive me for using this reference, but it's just on the top of my mind. But as I was looking at the chart, I was really thinking about Kanye, and how, you know, first of all, he lost his mother to a procedure that was to liposuction, complications from liposuction. So his mother had kind of fallen prey to white supremacist norms of body culture. And she died, and he was never the same after that. And I think that, you know, the beginning of the phase was confusion, or it was conformity. And I think that, like, you know, his mind was so like messed up with all of that and all these other things that, you know, he basically, you know, got with Kim and all of them, like, and really got into this place in Hollywood and in LA of like conformity and upholding white supremacy. And then, you know, when that fell apart, there was the confusion, and then there was like kind of the rejection. And I'm trying to remember the exact phases. There was like this rejection, and then there was this, you know, other phase, and it just reminded me of those like stupid shirts that he just came out with. I can't remember the phase. It was the immersion, I think. It was like the retreat back to, right? Is that the one, immersion?
Yes.
I think so. So I don't know. That immediately, like, I was like, I don't know if I should say this because I don't want it to be like a weird distraction or whatever. But that phase, that specific phase, immersion, like immediately made me think of Kanye and the t-shirts. And then I started to trace back from there, and I was like, well, before that, you know, he was kind of in this confusion state, you know, after the breakup. And then before that, there was this period of conformity, you know, where he was, you know, upholding, and it all kind of stems from, you know, going through the system, all of these things, and his mother dying as a result of probably, you know, the medical industrial complex and how it treats us so poorly, but also because of these white supremacist norms that dictated that, you know, she wasn't worthy unless she go through this, you know, dangerous surgery to suck, you know, like fat out of her body. So that's immediately what I thought of.
Thank you, Commissioner Jay. I'd like to hold for, well, actually, Commissioner Angie, go ahead. You see, I have your hand up. You have your hand up.
Thank you, Ayamidi. I just wanted to share because when Sophia brought up the book, Talk Like a White Girl, it totally brought up a lot of feelings for me too. But I know that when I was younger, the assimilation was everything to me, everything. And it kind of made this path of perfectionism that that really kind of destroyed a lot of who I really am, I feel like. And now now that I'm older and wiser, and I completely shun all of that. And I have 2 daughters, and I see them, they're not going down the perfectionism path because of the same reasons as me, because they present as white, you know, but it hurts me to see other younger people going down that same path, because I know how destructive it is to try to be a perfect person, because there is no such thing as a perfect person. And it took me a long time to learn that. And now that I'm old, I love who I am, and I wish I would have taken 8 million more pictures of myself and like just totally cherished who I was when I was younger. So all you young people, please just love who you are, because you're awesome. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Angie. I'm going to actually ask either Commissioner Debbie, Commissioner Jason, or Commissioner Dan to answer this question, just because we're getting lots of folks of color's points of view, but it is interesting to hear from the white people in the room about how these expressions of identity are interrelated or related. So if one of you can volunteer, that would be magnificent. Love to hear your perspective. And it is your choice to also not respond. Oh, Commissioner Dan, are you unmuted? No? Okay. Well, it is important for the commission to have a shared language, is the reason why I wanted to ask these questions and prime you into realizing how much you are the same in processing racial traumas. And that we're all in this together, and it takes only one person in the commission to be brave enough to step out of social norms that may cause harm. And I would love to see more of that be happening here. Part of my stuttering, I get nervous sometimes, and I'm human and I stutter sometimes. So that is my perfection of being who I am. So again, thank you for your time. One more slide I would like to share, and then we'll move on. Why must you as commissioners understand white supremacy culture? That is my question for y'all. And anyone can answer. And then we can transition. Christian, Commissioner Christian.
Can you hear me? Perfect. I'm just gonna rattle off. I don't know. I'm gonna form a very good sentence, but I feel like I mean, white supremacy culture is really ingrained in, I mean, not really ingrained, it is the foundation of policing, which is what we're talking about. So I feel like a deep understanding, maybe not deep, but at least some kind of understanding or willingness to discuss and talk about white supremacy culture for us all is super important, because if we don't understand it, or if we're uncomfortable with talking about it, it will just continue to perpetuate itself despite our best efforts to fight against policing. I don't know why I did quotes on policing, but I guess because it's like white supremacy, basically. And whether that makes you uncomfortable or not, I just think it's important to be able to talk about it at the very least, or be able to discuss it, if not have a deep understanding of it, or yeah, it'll just keep going. That's, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Commissioner Sophia.
Okay, sorry. I'm trying to find my mute and put my hand down. You know, white supremacy, as far as, you know, how we, you know, look at things in this commission and how we do things. I think those norms of white supremacy, of what the way something should be structured, it still dominates. And policing in particular, it's the issues with policing are on the people who have the least money, who are marginalized in our community in one way, shape, or form, by their color, their disability, or their mental health status. And the white supremacy was designed to keep that group down and managed. And as we go about our business on this commission, I think it's very important for us to see that the people who are affected don't have the capacity to participate the way the dominant culture has, because of finances and damage, I will just say, caused by racism of one way, shape, or form. The jobs that they get, the income that they get, the time that they have to commit, the assistance they need to raise their children. You know, these are all things that has been created through white supremacy that hinders their participation. And as is a commission of all types, really, we all need to understand that in order for this thing here to be successful, we really have to change the way we think about structuring things so that we can be inclusive to those people who don't have the same needs and the same resources. And that's going to be challenging for everyone to figure out how to do that. So, you know, I just want us to keep in mind that continuing with the white supremacist way of doing things can be detrimental to our commission if we don't think outside of the box and consider the people who actually the policing is affecting most primarily. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair Sophia, or subcommittee Co-Chair Sophia. And we'll end our time together with Commissioner Charlie's comments, and then we'll take 2 minutes just to kind of regroup.
Thank you. So again, my very first thoughts is how important it is to understand why this commission was created in the first place. Was because of white supremacy involvement in policing, and when George Floyd was murdered, you know, that's straight up white supremacy running the show. And then the very lack of accountability for police brutality up to and including murder, getting away with murder, is white supremacy. It's why we're here. It's why we need to make these changes, and we need to be more radical. And we can't be if we don't understand that white supremacy is driving this type of policing. It's so embedded that that needs to be understood, and we all need to be doing whatever we can to learn just how embedded it is, and then do whatever we can to try to change that. That's the bottom line.
Thank you, Commissioner Charlie. All right, Commission, meet you back here at 7:27. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Now we will move into discussion of the document. This is an open discussion, and we ask you to follow our normal discussion rules. Please be brief each time you speak, even though you can speak multiple times. Please be facilitated, and remember that the commission uses a weighted stack in our discussions. Finally, please be forward-looking in our comments. We're gonna start reviewing the draft areas of the agreement on best practices and practice to avoid for other jurisdictions. I also will, before sharing the document, I will pass it to the co-chairs or the co-chair Sophia to make any comment before reviewing this document. No?
I think, well, I did just want to remind everybody that the Subcommittee on Research referred the draft areas of agreement on best practices and practices to avoid from other jurisdictions to the full commission at the final subcommittee meeting was that last Thursday? It seems like it was so long ago. Sorry. The purpose of the document is to assess the practices in current effect in other jurisdictions. It doesn't cover anything currently happening in Portland or suggestions made by people working in other jurisdictions, as those were in other documents already approved by the full commission. Finally, it doesn't include suggestions from individual commission members, as that will be discussed as soon as the next phase of work starts. This document is designed to have a point of view, practices that the commission consider good and that they want to avoid are listed here. The document doesn't include proposals the subcommittee had no opinion on, but those can be brought back up at a later time when we're actually developing the recommendations in the future phases. And I just want to let everybody know that I'm having technical difficulties and using a different computer. So if I go in and out, I'm sorry about that. So thank you.
And we will wait for the staff to share the document. I will ask co-chair of this research subcommittee, Sophia, would you like Dr. Christine Moses to read, or would you like to read as we did it on Monday? I think
Support staff.
support staff. Yeah, please, staff.
Thank you. I think there may be some technical difficulties for subcommittee co-chair Sophia. So while we're waiting for that, just wanted to quickly talk about the document and the sort of pacing through it. The full commission looked at this document on Monday and excuse me, used their time to work through. There are 104 different parts of the document, entries in here, plus 2 additional introductory sentences, one at the beginning, one at the end, or I should say one at the top of each category. So of those 106, just over 50 of them were completed last at the Monday meeting. So picking up where the commission left off and resuming the same process of walking through, seeing if there's anything that can get resolved quickly or flagging it for further discussion. And then once the full pass through the document is completed, going back and having those further discussions. There are 12 current portions of the document that are flagged for further discussion. There may be more as the commission goes through the remaining 50 or so things. And then we'll get right back to it and start having those discussions occur. So that's why, although P is obviously not the first letter in the alphabet, why it's showing P1 right now, because the commission got through everything up to that already on Monday.
Thank you. Co-Chair Sophia, Dr. Moses offered to read, or would you like to read as we were doing it on Monday? It's up to you.
I can start, and then I can hand it over to Dr. Moses and Commissioner Tomlinson. We can rotate. How's that sound?
That sounds pretty good. Thank you very much. And we're ready. Going to.
All right. We're at section P, discipline and corrective action. The oversight body has a final say on the minimum level of discipline. So please take a moment to review.
And I just want to let everybody know that this P1 requires scrolling the page. And it's still more information to come after this page. It's a big one. Okay, the question I asking to the commissioners is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? And I need to your hands, okay. There's a couple, oh, thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Next one.
P2, police leadership may deviate upwards from the discipline chosen by the oversight agency, but not downwards. Please take a moment to review.
Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? You can show me your hands. Okay. I cannot see CMAP or OB. Oh, sorry. Okay, CMAP, thank you. Thank you. Okay, or Jason, I didn't see it. But everything else, thank you very much. Next.
P3. There is a defined discipline matrix, including defined options for discipline or corrective actions and applicable to the same jurisdictions as the oversight body, with limited flexibility for application to individual cases. Please take a moment to review.
Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate a best practice to consider? Thank you. Next one.
Section Q, hearings and findings. Q1, the oversight body uses a standard set of 4 options for findings in all cases. Please take a moment to review.
And it is obvious we need to scroll the page for you to finish reading. Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. Next one.
Q2, the oversight body may add to the standard set of 4 individual level finding options, with additional findings regarding the police department to improve future conduct. Please take a moment to review.
Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you.
Q3, the oversight body may dismiss cases in limited situations defined by law. Please take a moment to review.
Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you.
Q4, findings are determined using the preponderance of evidence standard. Please take a moment to review.
And this requires scrolling the page. And before I ask the question, I'm gonna ask staff to clarify. Yes, and then Commissioner Dan. Go ahead, staff.
Thank you. So the subcommittee on research referred this document out and made 2 decisions on, I think on the last day of the meeting. One was to add in these 4 items that would define the standard of review. The other was to ask staff to create a definitions actually that came up at the full commission on Monday as well, to create a definitions section up at the top to define oversight body, oversight agency, the sort of genericized terms that we use for that the PAC uses for the volunteer-led group as well as for the staff agency. And so was going to make a suggestion that these definitions of the standards, because only one of them actually appears in this entry, be moved up to the definitions. The other point on this is that there is an earlier item K4, K5, which also refers to preponderance of the evidence and occurs earlier in the document. And so the reader would not need to have to scroll up and down to find it, but would have it rather where all the definitions are at the very top of the document. It's not proposing any sort of textual change, just moving these four places, four items up and keeping the things that actually relate to this particular entry where they are.
Thank you, staff. And now Commissioner Dan.
Thank you. Dan Handelman, he, him pronouns. I was going to just leave it with what staff just said, but I think that for these 4 points, there should be a little like header that says possible findings, possible standards of review are, just so it's clear why they're there. Because I agree with you that it doesn't really necessarily belong where it is, but I think to clarify that those 4 belong together and they're not the same kind of definition as the 2 that were outlined, having just a little something to explain what they are, which is, possible standards of review. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Then we have the suggestion to move these to definitions, but also to put a subtitle in the definitions, possible standards of review included at the top. Then the questions will be if there is any opposition to the proposed change of these 2. Okay, is there general agreement to the proposed change or moving this to definition and put the title? Okay, thank you. Now I will have to ask, the question of Q4 is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. We can go to the next one.
Q5, the oversight body communicates the findings to the complainant. And could you please read over?
Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. Next one.
Q6, the oversight body may create panels to hear cases and determine violations of policy findings.
This Q6 require scrolling of the page. Is this practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Okay, thank you. We can go to the next.
Q7, information is distributed before the hearing.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. We can go to the next.
Q8, the hearings process has accommodations to ensure accessibility for complainants.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. We can go to the next.
Q9, hearings have consistent procedures.
And this requires scrolling the page. Now it fits, everything fits on one page. Thank you. Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. We can go to the next one.
Q10, the oversight body can take interim steps prior to findings being determined in specific cases.
Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. We will skip Q11 because it's already flagged for further discussion. And we will review that the second when we finish this. Thank you.
Section R, investigations. R1, the presumptive timeline to complete an investigation is 180 days or less.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you.
R2, the timeline to complete an investigation may be extended.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you.
R3, investigations must follow established guidelines.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you.
R4, investigators must gather evidence, including video evidence, and conduct and record interviews.
We will need to scroll the page on this one. Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you.
R5, the investigative process is structured to be accessible for all involved and supportive of complainants navigating the process.
Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider?
I had a concern about something.
Sure.
Well, I mean, we've often seen that like collective bargaining organizations and police associations are in stark opposition to justice, and stark opposition to accountability. And so that just brings me pause to, say that like, I mean, I feel like this question almost presupposes that like it's even, like it's a both sides thing. Like, oh yeah, well, the civilians get to bring a support person. Well, the police get to bring a support person too, versus the collective bargaining unit is an institutional support. That's not the same thing as a support person. And so it's an inherently uneven support structure. Does that make sense? I don't know what the alternative is, but it's just a thought.
Commissioner, would you like to flag this for further discussion? Or you have any suggestion on how the language should be? Commissioner Jay? No? Okay, but we can flag it for the discussion.
Yeah, I don't have any language on it, but I'll think about it and see if I can, think of something.
That's perfectly okay. We will put it to come back to this for the discussion. Okay. We can go to the next one.
R6, complainants have access to case file information online.
Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as best practice to consider?
She's a baby. Do you see the baby in the mirror?
Thank you. Before going to the next one, Commissioner Dan, you have your hand to ask a question? Okay, then we will go with you. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I think that Co-Chair Tomlinson accidentally inserted an extra word into that. This isn't about the case file. This is about information about the case itself. The case file is addressed in a different area, I think.
Okay, can we go thank you, Commissioner Dan. Can we go to the document and see what Commissioner Dan is referring to? Okay. How
did I say case file information? I'm sorry. I read it incorrectly.
Okay, then I will ask, complaints have access to case information online. And I will ask again, is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as best practice to consider? Can I see their hands count? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. We can go to the next one.
Okay, I don't know, Christine, if you'd like to take over, or I can continue section T.
I'll be glad to step in.
Thank you.
Sure.
And I will also say that this requires scrolling, but yeah, go ahead, Dr. Moses.
Thank you, Victoria. T, complaint process, timeline, and intake. T1, the oversight system includes a broad definition of who can file complaints alleging police misconduct. Please review.
Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as best practice to consider? Thank you. We can go to the next one. And this-
T2.
I'm sorry, Dr. Marsich, go ahead.
That's
Sorry.
okay. There's a little bit of a lag here for me. So T2, the complaint process is inclusive and offers multiple methods as well as accommodations to ensure access.
Thank you. And I was gonna say that this requires scrolling the page, T2. Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as best practice to consider? Thank you. We can go to the next one.
T3, the oversight agency has provisions to accept anonymous complaints.
Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. We can go to the next one.
T4, the allowable time after an incident in which a civilian can file a complaint is large enough to ensure access to community and able to be extended.
Thank you. And this doesn't need scrolling the page. Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you.
T5, complainants receive a record of their complaint, including a notice of completion of an investigation.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. Next one, please.
P6, incomplete or unverified complaints can be investigated if the oversight body determines investigation is warranted.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you.
V, mediation. V1, the oversight body has the authority to conduct voluntary mediation between community members and law enforcement.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. We can go to the next one.
V2, mediation is offered in more minor cases, but not in more serious cases.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. We can go to the next one.
V3, mediation is accessible and open to affected individuals, in some cases to people other than complainants.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. We can go to the next one.
V4, mediation for minor cases when when successful, can be an alternative to investigation.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. We can go to the next one.
W, oversight agency community engagement. W1, the oversight body conducts public education on the role of the oversight system and community members' rights.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. We can go to the next one.
W2, the oversight body engages with the community on how to improve police practices and policy.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. The next one, please.
W3, the oversight body conducts education on their activities for new law enforcement personnel and bargaining unit representatives.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Okay, thank you. We can go to the next one.
I'll hand this over to co-chair Glenn.
Thank you. Section X, collective bargaining. The oversight agency has representation in the room during collective bargaining. Please take a moment to review.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you.
Section Y, access to information. Y1, the oversight body has the ability to subpoena evidence. Please take a moment to review.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, Butcher. Sophia. And this requires scrolling the page. Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you.
Y2, the oversight body has the ability to compel officer participation and testimony. Please take a moment to review.
And this page requires scrolling these numbers. Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. We can go to the next one.
Section Z, continuous improvement. Z1, the oversight body is required to self-evaluate and recommend changes to its structure on an ongoing basis and through regularly scheduled self-evaluations. Please take a moment to review.
And this number requires scrolling the page. Okay, now everything on this Z1 is on, you can see everything here. And let me ask if it's the same question because the last point, but is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. We can go to the next one. And staff.
Yes, so that is the end of the list of best practices. Now there are seven, but one's already flagged for further discussion, items under the practices to avoid. So just for anyone listening or for the members of the commission, as you read this, it's describing the practice, but its inclusion represents a choice to label it a practice to avoid. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 1, statute of limitations on completing investigation processes. Please review.
Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a practice to avoid? Thank you. We can go to this next one.
Number 2, civilian board and internal affairs running parallel investigations. Please review.
Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a practice to avoid? Thank you.
Number 3, officers are provided with the names of investigators, complainants, and witnesses. Please review.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a practice to avoid? Thank you. Next one.
Number 4, the same agency that accepts complaints also accepts officer commendations. Please review.
Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a practice to avoid? Thank you.
Number 5, the process of filing a complaint about the police involves an interaction with the police.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a practice to avoid? Thank you.
Number 6, complainants must be signed under penalty of perjury. I'm going to read that again. Complaints must be signed under penalty of perjury.
Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a practice to avoid? Thank you. Because the next one is already flagged to have a discussion, we're gonna pass it when we review all the ones that have a discussion. It is A15. We're gonna take a 10 minutes break and come back to review the rest of the documents. Thank you. Thank you. And staff or co-chairs, as any one of you would like to explain what will be the process for the following to revise the ones that need discussion?
So I will ask staff if he could give us a little summary.
Thank you. Yes. So there are there's two ways to count this, but there are flags reflecting 16 different items in total that the commission needs to go through. Prior to today's meeting, members were asked to provide proposed text, comments, whatnot, and then there were some that were added in during today's meeting or as well as during the last meeting. So there are 16 total items to get through. Some of these can get resolved possibly in pairs because it's the same kind of item in two different places. And so I will explain that as we go. Also, prior to this meeting, co-chairs of the subcommittee asked, as part of going through this, if we could order them essentially in an anticipated order of what might take the least time to what might take the most time, to help the members of the commission be aware of the overall timing of the meeting, and asked if I could put those in order. So this order you may see a couple things jumping around. We'll put in the chat all the different numbers that are affected here, just so that's visible and transparent. As we go through each, the goal is to eventually resolve outstanding concerns, determine whether to make the proposed changes or not. Sometimes they will involve a question being asked of someone who may have done the research on the subcommittee, and sometimes they may also ask consideration of, can this item just possibly be removed, or this portion of the item as well, and does the rest stand on its own? And just as a reminder, like this is essentially needs to both be something that is a practice, as well as something that fits into the relevant place, whether it's in the minds of the commissioners, whether it fits as a best practice or a practice to avoid, et cetera. So just a moment here, going to put in a few of these, but there are 16 as mentioned, and we'll start with B3 and B4. These were originally considered one proposal, but there was a second suggestion that came in, and this is a little bit of a long one, so there'll be some scrolling. Apologies in advance. The oversight body has defined authority over, at minimum, alleged misconduct directly affecting the public. And then there was B4, which had the oversight board oversees the oversight agency investigating complaints and has the authority to direct agency and director to investigate cases. In the last meeting, Commissioner Debbie, prior to that, had suggested deleting this because the text had read in a way that was inaccurate, and then adding this text about Denver to B3 instead. So at the time, it was anticipated that this would be sort of one package to fix both of these things. It has now been separated in part, or could be separated, because Commissioner Dan has clarified that the reason it was incorrect is that it kind of got smushed together, in the sense that there was a sentence about San Francisco that was written as if it was about Denver. So if we can perhaps start with the P3 portion and just look at the addition of this text, and then we get to resolving B4 in a moment. Sorry, B3 and B4 as in boy, sorry.
So I can read the heading for B3 and then what the proposed addition will be. So the heading is B3, the oversight body has defined authority over, at a minimum, alleged misconduct directly affecting the public. And then I'll give you a couple of 30 seconds or so. Oh no, okay. I'm proposing that we include Denver's independent monitor may conduct investigations into serious offenses by uniformed personnel and citizen complaints regarding force, discrimination, retaliation, discourtesy, or in the best interest of the city. The oversight board may review closed cases where the monitor conducted the investigation. The case may be referred back to the agency with recommendations on the outcome and or with recommendations related to police procedures. And we are proposing to add that in.
Co-chair, you want me to ask the question?
I think we are asking the question as right now instead of moving on to the next one.
Okay, and I know Commissioner Debbie proposed it, and I will say, is there any opposition to the proposed change? Is there general agreement to the proposed change? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Victoria.
You're welcome. And then since we go up to B4 for the changes, should I need to ask about approving B3? Yes, thank you. Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. Thank you.
So this one can go in a few different directions and orders, but starting with the last one, the lowest part on the screen, to make the change here from I'll just show how it looked before. It looked before as one sentence without any reference to San Francisco, and the proposed change would add in the punctuation at the end of the sentence and San Francisco information here.
Okay, and I will ask the question just for those points, just for what you just showed. Is there any opposition to the proposed change? And I have Commissioner Devi, Commissioner Dan, do you want to talk about this? Yes, okay, Commissioner Devi and then Commissioner Dan.
Oh, so I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're asking us to say yes to.
Thank you. I can ask.
Sorry.
Is there any opposition? Is there general agreement to the proposed change of adding San Francisco in the points that is highlighted in pink? And I can read it. In Denver, the Oversight Board serves as eyes and ears of the public. In San Francisco, the Police Commission oversees both the Department of the Police Accountability and the Police Department. And Commissioner Dan?
You're muted still.
Computer. Thank you. Sorry, I was muted on the computer. I was double muted. Yeah, I don't see how Denver fits into this anymore. I think what needs to happen, I know it's kind of confusing, I'm sorry, just bear with me for a second, is that the second sentence of the header, the B4 bolded part, the thing that says the Oversight Board oversees both the Police Department and the Oversight Agency investigating complaints, that should stay. Identified in should remove Denver, and the sentence about Denver should disappear. And then I think this section will be complete.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Let me just see staff. Marjorie, how would you like to do it? And then I can ask the questions. Is this way what you were suggesting? Thank you. Okay, now we have the B4 in green that's highlighted. And I will ask, is there any opposition to the proposed change for B4? Thank you. Is there general agreement to the proposed change for B4? Okay, thank you. We can go to the next one.
So this one is not actually.
Yeah. I'm sorry, staff, and thank you, Commissioner Dan. I need to ask for B4.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was just about to say something. So
Thank you. Are you meeting? Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? And I'm talking about B4. Thank you. Thank you.
So for this one, it doesn't actually need scrolling. It just looks like it does. There was an addition made at the towards the end. It was an item that just got kind of forgotten until the end of the subcommittee's final meeting, got added in, and it was added in as a partial best practice. The proposal would be to take this item and redesignate it up here by essentially just deleting this sentence that isolates it as a partial best practice. So the question will be about removing this sentence essentially, because that'll move the Oakland comment up into here. Commissioner Debbie may have more to say on this as well.
I think you're capturing well what we talked about before was, right? I think that this is an, similar practice to the ones listed above. So it's also a best practice or practice to consider.
Okay, so I'll read D3. D3, community members apply for oversight body membership and applications are screened before passing them to the appointing authority. So I'll let Victoria ask the questions for the change, for the addition.
Thank you. And before approving D3, I will ask the question about the suggestion that Commissioner Debbie has. And is there any opposition to the proposed change? And we're talking only about the eliminating the title and adding the point, the outline. Okay. Is there general agreement to the proposed change? Thank you. We can make this change and then I will ask about the D3. Okay. Now I will ask about D3. Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you.
Christian, do you have your hand up for a question?
Oh, yes, Christian. Thank you, Ayumi.
Thank you. I think Faith might have mentioned that we should add the Oakland to the identified in section. I don't know if that ended up happening or not. I thought I saw that it didn't, but I just wanted to check. Thank you. On the last one, sorry, the B4, or I think it was B4. No, sorry, B3. I can't remember.
Oh, very good point. And I can ask again because to add it just to have it ready for D3, the community members apply for oversight body membership and application are screened before passing them on to the appointing authority. And is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Christian. Okay.
So for this one, this was flagged for further discussion in another in the meeting on Monday, because it had previously stated, or it currently states, including all information except complainant and officer names in specific situations. And so subcommittee co-chairs took a look at this and essentially kept in the items which had included officer names as best practices and included the items that did not have officer names but had everything else as partial best practices instead. And then adjusted the header to say reporting on closed cases includes all information except complainant names in specific situations. So this is kind of a package of changes to, I think, is an attempt to address Commissioner and Co-Chair Faith's concern.
Thank you. Then the questions will be, is there any opposition to the proposed changes?
And can I just give everybody a moment to read, because it's going to take a second to scroll.
Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you. Again, is there any opposition to the proposed changes? Okay, is there general agreement to the proposed changes? Thank you. Thank you. And now I will wait for the staff, and then I have to ask the question about. Okay. Thank you. And the question is for J3. Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you.
So for this one, section B5, there's a proposed removal from subcommittee co-chairs Angie and Sophia of the sentence, San Diego staff believes this power has never been used in San Diego, and one or both of them may be able to speak to that.
Yes. I'm sorry, go ahead, Angie.
I can speak to it, Sophia. So part of what we removed from this document previously was an opinion of, or what the subcommittee believed in the descriptions of the headers. So I felt that this was a little superfluous, considering San Diego staff believes this power has never been used in San Diego. So that's why I proposed, that's why we both agreed that it would be removed. But if you want to say anything, Sophia, please jump in. Thank you.
No, just to add, just add a little. I was also saying, well, does it matter if they use it or not? It's one of the practices that they have on their books and something that we would like to see. Then we don't need to kind of, when you add that last sentence, it kind of negates the first part. So that was kind of our thought process. Yeah, I'm sorry, because it didn't matter whether it was used or not. The subcommittee did agree that we like that. So I'll turn it back over to you, facilitator.
Thank you. And Commissioner Dan has raised his hand. Commissioner Dan?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm the one that did the research on this. I think it's important to leave this in because as we're looking at stuff to put into Portland's board, and somebody might challenge us and say, oh, well, yes, this exists somewhere, but they never used it. We can show that that our research reflected that, but it's still written into the code. Just because they didn't use it doesn't mean it's not important. So I think that it actually strengthens it for us to have that in there, to say it's written in there. It's just that they've never taken advantage of it, but perhaps our system can. So I think it would be good to leave it in there as a piece of research to solidify in case somebody challenges this point, that we understand that may not have ever been used, but we still want to use it in Portland anyway. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Commissioner Charlie?
I have 2 more cents to add. So do they believe, or how come they don't know this power has never been used? Has it or hasn't it?
See, that was part of our point, Commissioner Charlie, that, you know, it's a belief, it's not a fact. And that's the way it's written. So we just thought not to even use it. That's kind of the thought process. Thank you.
Commissioner Sima? Thank you.
Appreciate it. I'm with Dan. I believe in actually keeping it in place. I do believe in having laws that don't necessarily come back to bite community members, and this is one of them. Or this is a power that probably won't come back and be like, well, it could be turned against a community member. It's specifically geared towards being able to hold law enforcement accountable if there is potential criminal action that we're determining, and being able to forward it towards that. And there's a lot to be said about our current criminal legal system and how it holds the bad guys, people hurting community members, whether it be cops or whatnot, and finding metrics of accountability and where and what's. I can go further into being like, yeah, we don't have a proper criminal legal system that actually holds true power to account, just people, its citizens, or its community members. But with that being said, I think that this does help give hope that there could be some teeth and that we can point it in a specific direction. And if the system fails on that end, well, at least we had a direction to kind of push some things. I just feel like it does give a little bit of teeth.
Thank you, Commissioner Sima. And Commissioner Charlie, you want to speak again? No? Okay. Commissioner Angie?
I just wanted to make the clarification that San Diego staff believes that this has never been used in San Diego, but I just want to say that we're voting to identify that the PAC identifies this authority as a best practice. So I'm just kind of clarifying, we're voting if we want to leave this in or not. So, okay.
Thanks, and yeah, it's we're not the whole point is just to highlight it in pink area, just removing that sentence, not the first one that says in San Diego, the oversight body has the authority to ask for criminal investigations. That's all good. The speculation is in the last sentence that says the staff believes the power has never been used in San Diego, and that's what we're suggesting, because it's not necessarily a fact. We believe it is, but nobody knows. So it's best just not to have it in there. The part that we want is that the oversight body has the authority for criminal investigation. So that's not the point to take out. It's just the last sentence that's pretty a little bit I call it ambiguous, because we don't really know, and does it really matter if they haven't used it? Doesn't matter. We like it, whether they use it or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. And then let me ask the question. Is there any opposition to the proposed change of taking just that part out as shown in the example? Okay. Is there general agreement to the proposed change? Do we have, I didn't count.
I couldn't quite see it.
Okay, I
Can you
need
do
to
that
ask,
again, please?
can you please raise your hands to the ones that agree to the proposed change, just to count it?
Okay. Can I see the abstaining or?
I can ask the other question. Can all those against the change raise their hands? Okay, one. And could you, all those abstaining, please raise your hand? Okay. Thank you. That's clear, because we don't have reached consensus, we need to do a vote. Thank you.
Oh, Christian has a question.
Christian, go ahead.
Sorry, my mute button was blocked. I just wanted to point out there was a suggestion in the chat from Jay about sorry if I pronounced the name wrong. Just a suggestion on text changes. I don't know if that's something we want to consider. And then it also got me thinking if maybe what we're just clarifying what we're talking about in the text. So leaving in, well, I guess I don't have a huge stake either way. I just wanted to make a suggestion of if we were to keep in the bit about them being unsure, maybe clarifying afterwards that just saying what people have been saying, that that doesn't necessarily matter. We still think it's an important thing to have in there. But then I guess if we're saying that, maybe just the whole thing can be taken out anyway. So I'm kind of in the middle of all of this. I just wanted to suggest that. I was like, if that tickles anyone's fancy. Yeah, that was all. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, I see the chat. I will pass it to staff and then Commissioner Dan.
Yeah, so just as a clarification, normally we would have the co-chairs decide when it's time for a vote, but as the vote was already called, that change has taken effect. It's still up in the air to what, you know, the members of the commission can still decide, because you'll be asking another question in a moment about whether or not it's something that the commission would like to designate as a practice to consider the way it's currently reads. So there's still an opportunity for it, but just wanted to clarify where exactly we're at right now. So as far as I'm aware, and please correct me, facilitators, if this is incorrect, that vote was essentially successful, and it currently looks, the text is currently this that is showing on screen. And again, still room to edit further as needed, but is that accurate?
That's accurate, but yeah, of course we can.
Okay. Thank you. So please feel free to continue, sorry.
Yes, okay. Commissioner Dan?
Well, so I don't think we drilled down into consensus when we wrote the bylaws very much, but my intention in standing aside was that if the majority of the group wants to do this, I'm not going to stand in the way. It's not like an abstention during a vote, in my opinion, and it's not me being opposed to it. I just don't want to go on record as supporting it. So I'm just standing aside, and I hope that means we don't have to take a vote. I'm perfectly happy to see this put in there at the behest of the majority of the commission without us taking a formal vote. Thank you.
And just to clarify for staff, I didn't see that it was a vote. It was to see if there was consensus.
Right. So if there's a request for a vote for in favor, against, abstention, that is a vote. Whereas if it's simply the absence of the commission's working definition of consensus is the absence of strong opposition and the presence of general agreement. So there's no question, yes, no, abstain in that scenario. But that's what was asked. So it's fine to make the comparison and use the numbers in the internal processing document, which does say that it holds, and that vote was called, held, passed, and all of that. To clarify Commissioner Dan's point, that is correct as to how standing aside is interpreted. It does not mean lack of wanting to hold up consensus. That's 100% correct. The only question comes up is if everybody was standing aside, right? Would it be worth having continuing discussion? And so for future reference, if there is a significant number of members who are not in agreement, then facilitators know that there isn't consensus and to continue with the process at that point. So can't go back on this one, and no need on that particular vote. Perhaps there is a need to make further changes, of course, and that's still available to you right now. But this is the text as you see it on screen is the text as it currently is. And we can go into questioning whether or not it's a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider.
Okay. Thank you. Then should I move about, is this practice? Okay, is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you. We can go to the next one.
I'll just read it real quick. E3, the oversight body has defined criteria for automatic member removal. And I'll let staff go.
Thank you. On Monday, this was flagged for further discussion. Specifically the phrase criminally convicted and unable to serve, as well as the phrase no longer being a resident. Subcommittee co-chairs Angie and Sophia proposed a change to resolve at least the first part of that by changing criminally convicted to currently incarcerated. And then there may be further discussion on the second half of that, but this is at least one proposal that could be decided upon first.
Okay, I can ask the question for the first point only. And the first point I can ask, is there any opposition to the proposed change that the use currently incarcerated and unable to serve, financial or personal conflict of interest? That resignation no longer be an arrested. And I'm sorry, just for the first, just for the first change, that's changing currently incarcerated instead of criminally convicted. Is there any opposition to the proposed change? Is there general agreement to the proposed change? Just to use those two words. Okay, thank you. Now we can go to the rest of the point. Let's say.
Commissioner Monica's hands raised.
Commissioner Monica?
Hello. Instead of, could we change resident to no longer living in the city, in San Diego City, to take care of the issue of the word? And would that take care of it?
City or county?
It looks like it's San Diego City, not county.
Yes.
Because it's after the semicolon, right? San Diego City, death, resignation, no longer living in the city, in San Diego City, not county.
You put county instead of city. Can you correct that in order for me to ask the question?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Dan might have a comment on that. I don't know if the semicolon's the right point there, but I can change it however you'd like. Yes.
Okay, and also Commissioner Sophia.
I was just going to ask for clarification for the person who did the research, about whether it's being a resident, what they meant by resident or whether they actually meant living in the city. So that's all. I just needed some clarification.
Thank you. Commissioner Dan?
Yeah, it is San Diego County. I'm not sure how to fix the punctuation there. Maybe there needs to be a semicolon after San Diego City. But yeah, and just had this discussion with a member of the commission. I just want to make it absolutely clear that this doesn't mean that that's what our new board's going to do. It just means that's what they do in San Diego County, and we can define any kind of geographic area we want to that people have to be living in for the new board. This is just what they do in San Diego County. So we have an example to use as we're moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Then let me ask the question. Is there any opposition to the proposed change instead of being a resident living in San Diego County? Is there general agreement to the proposed change with living in San Diego County? Okay, thank you. And then I will come back and ask for E3. The oversight body has defined criteria for automatic member renewal. And the question is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this one is in some ways similar to the excuse me, the one that was resolved earlier. I believe it was R3. We'll get to it in a minute. But if we haven't already, about adjusting the header versus adjusting the examples and where they're classified. So currently reads the oversight body has a publicly disclosed budget. There is a proposed change to remove the designation of Philadelphia, Washington, DC, and the city of San Diego as counterexamples and replace that with a heading statement that says in several cities, the budget is guaranteed at a certain level. It is not clear whether these budgets are sufficient to fund the agency in each jurisdiction. There is also another proposed change, which would retain the two-part system, move Philadelphia up, I'll show this visually, move Philadelphia up into the publicly disclosed budget and add that includes guarantees of a minimum allocation. So retaining separation of New York and Philadelphia and avoiding Washington, DC and both present and past San Diego in that scenario versus putting them all together essentially in one set of examples.
Yes, thank you, staff. And Commissioner Monica, please.
Yeah, just a quick note that when I talked to Philadelphia, they were very disappointed about less than 1% to have as a budget. So I wouldn't put that up there as sufficient, or, you know, that was a very upsetting number to them. I would say that 1% of the police department's budget should be in practice to avoid.
Okay. Then what is the proposed change? So there are two options, or how we gonna manage this question? Do we need to discuss it more?
If I may, so the proposal is to take Philadelphia as a counterexample. Just move that down into the next section. Yeah, as a counterexample. Practice to avoid. Is that what you're suggesting, Commissioner Monica? Okay. So that's the suggestion.
And it's actually already there.
Oh.
It's already at the bottom. I think that was opposition to potentially moving it up. So it already lives down in the practices to avoid, but there is a proposal to remove this sentence and therefore no longer have it be a designation either. So put another way, there are two different proposals and the commission can also keep it the way it is. One is to remove this sentence. The Police Accountability Commission has also identified several counterexamples which it considers practice to avoid and adding this instead. The other would be to include that there is a guaranteed minimum allocation to it. And again, could do one, could do both, could do neither. Those are both available.
Yes, co-chair Faith.
As a person who was not on the subcommittee, I'm having a hard time tracking. So I want to make sure I understand. Was the original suggestion that Washington, DC and San Diego, moving those up, it's because those are not considered counter examples? Is that why? Okay. So I see your head nodding. So your suggestion is currently where it stands, the suggestion is Philadelphia is a counterexample, Washington, DC, and the city of San Diego have a publicly disclosed budget that guarantees a minimum allocation.
Thank you, Commissioner Faith. I think they can answer your question, but I will pass it to staff first.
Okay, so yeah, one other thing that may be notable, the subcommittee in its last meeting voted to change the header. It had previously stated something slightly different, and that might have affected why things were categorized the way they were originally. It used to say something to the effect of the oversight body has a budget sufficient to conduct its operations or something to that effect, and it was changed to publicly disclosed budget. And in the previous iteration, when it was sufficient enough, there was a pretty clear distinction between having a $39 million budget and having a at most $2.5 million budget that may the two categories may not perfectly align any longer with the header having been changed. So that's just another piece of context that might explain why it was the way it was.
Thank you, staff. And now we'll pass it to Commissioner Monica.
I think I would support changing the title to what it is now. The oversight body has publicly disclosed budget that includes guarantees of a minimum allocation identified in all of these places, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, DC, city of San Diego, all these places. Take out that pink sentence. And I like this one in green. In several cities, the budget is guaranteed at a certain level, but it is not clear whether this is sufficient. Done. And then we list all of the examples of all of the things we found. We just don't know if these are sufficient or not.
Well, thank you. That's a great idea, Commissioner Monica. I'm gonna ask that, but at first I'm gonna check with Commissioner Dan.
I agree with 95% of what Commissioner Arce just said. I think the guaranteed minimum allocation is not present in New York or Washington, D.C. or San Diego. So I think we should just leave it that the oversight body has a publicly disclosed budget. And then everything else you said, I agree with. Thank you.
Okay, then if we take that, I'm gonna ask Commissioner Monica, what will be your last proposal?
I like what Dan just said. That sounds great. A publicly disclosed budget is plenty. Yeah.
Okay, then we will take out, consider to take out the includes guarantee minimum allocation. Okay, then let me ask the questions for the changes and I can ask for the changes. Is there any opposition to the proposed changes, to all the proposed changes that were designed here? Is there general agreement to the proposed changes? Okay, thank you. And then the next question will be, and I'm waiting for the staff to make all the proposed changes. Think the title.
Does this still need to be resolved, or is it?
We already vote for the.
Okay, thank you.
Not vote, sorry, we come to the consensus. You need to take it out, yeah, okay. Now, is this a practice that PAC would like to designate a best practice to consider? Okay, thank you. We can go to the next one.
So there are two parts to this one that probably should be looked at separately. One of them is the oversight body members are given enough. Sorry, I don't know why it's showing this way. I fix the track changes. It says oversight body members are given sufficient training to exercise their duties on behalf of the public. And there is a proposal, there are two different proposals. One is to remove the word sufficient. The other is to replace it with the word enough. And then there's a separate comment on the later portion of the document as well. The later portion of the entry as well.
Okay.
We'll get to that afterwards.
I can ask separate, the question separate. And we go for the title first. Is there any opposition to the proposed change that using enough instead of sufficient training to exercise their duties on behalf of the public? Commissioner Dan?
Yeah, well, this is my proposal, and enough and sufficient are basically the same thing. That we don't know whether the training that's given in these cities is sufficient to do their job. We just know that they're given training so that they can do their jobs. We don't know if it's sufficient or not. So kind of the same thing we're talking about the budget. I think we should just say they're given training. That's true, not arguable, no opinion there. And then just list what the training is. Thanks.
Okay, then the new proposals take sufficient and enough out and then leave given training. Okay. Is there any more discussion on for me to ask the question of the title? Okay, the new proposal is take sufficient and enough out. Is there any opposition to the proposed change? Is there general agreement to the proposed change? Okay, thank you. Now for the second part.
Yeah, so there's again two different proposals here. So there's a proposal to move the LA County item down to the bottom, which was interpreted as possibly a counterexample to given training. And then there was another proposal to remove this entire section. And you can see in the comment here that the first proposal was perhaps this is too much time to ask. And the second proposal says it's unclear whether 6-month training means 9 to 5, Monday to Friday for 6 months, or just 2 to 3 evening sessions. You know, to what does 6 months of mandatory training mean? And proposing if there's ambiguity around it to remove it and let what's left support the header.
Okay, any discussion? There's someone wants to propose one change instead of the other? Commissioner Sheriff.
Yeah, I'd like to, I think the co-chair suggestions make sense. Just doesn't seem like we have enough information to say it's good or bad. So
Okay,
removing it.
removing it. Thank you. Okay, then if there's no more discussion, I'm gonna ask the question. Is there any opposition to the proposed change or removing the whole sentence that's highlighted? Is there general agreement to the proposed change to removing this sentence? Okay, thank you. Then now I can ask the other question for D4. Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Okay, thank you. Yes.
And as I'm scrolling to the next one, just wanted to mention that there's a 9 out of the 16 are resolved, so over halfway through these, just to flag it for you all. And this is a possibly linked question, and it has to do with examples that are in the middle, essentially. So there was a oversight body is large enough to be representative of the city's population. This was flagged for further discussion. There's an example of 23 that's considered currently as a good practice, 15 as a good practice, counterexamples of 5 to 9 and 7. And then there's a sentence that's in San Diego County, the board can have between 9 and 15. County code currently sets the number at 11. And the question is this a good practice or if it should be removed? And while, again, letting the remainder of the examples support the header that the oversight body is able to be representative. And might make sense to just do this one and then ask if the same applies to a different example, which we'll go to right after that on a different item. So the proposal is to remove this sentence and allow the remainder of the examples to support the header.
Okay, thank you. But Commissioner Sophia has the right.
Yes, I just wanted to ask Commissioner Obi, I know he had a comment as well, so if he wanted to chime in, to please do.
Okay. Should I ask the question then, Commissioner Dan?
Hi, so I'm going to try to address both my opposition to the removal and the question from the comments there on the side. That you know, the question about whether it should be about per capita, that's something we need to discuss about what we want to do in Portland. The removal, I feel like it's really important for us to have an example where there's a sliding scale like that, where if that's something we want to consider, saying there can be, you know, X is the lowest amount and Y is the highest amount, that we put it in there. We don't know if that is good enough to be representative of San Diego County or not. I don't think it should be called, you know, removed from being a best practice. We don't know if it is sufficient or not. I would really strongly suggest leaving it in there so that when we're making decisions later down the line, how many people to have, that it can give us that the idea of maybe that we want to have the ability to set a low and high number so that we don't have to keep going back to the city code or the charter or whatever to fix that. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Then the suggestion, yes, Commissioner Sophia.
Sorry, I just keep going back and forth, putting my hand up and taking it down because I was like, okay, but no. Yeah, I'm just taking in the points that Commissioner Dan had in there, and my thought is, you know, we're just making suggestions. It doesn't mean we're going to use any of this stuff. I know we want to be perfect on the document, but I'm just thinking to myself, I think we got enough information here to prove the point that we're trying to make. And if we have to, you know, go back and forth about one item, I don't know if it's even worth going back and forth over it, because I think we have quite a good slew of information here to support the heading. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna ask the question, the proposed, what I understand, the proposed change is to take out the part that say in San Diego County, the board can have between 9 and 15 members. County code currently sets the number 11. And the proposed, is there any opposition to take this sentence out? We have 2 members oppose, 3 members oppose, okay, 4 members oppose. Thank you. Is there a general agreement to take this sentence out? There was a proposed change. Okay, then I can ask, or we can keep talking, or I can ask reverse. Is there any position to leave this sentence and then agreement? Okay, I can ask a question. The proposal, the different proposal is to leave that sentence there, and leaving the sentence there. Is there any opposition to leave that sentence there? Okay. Is there general agreement to leave that sentence there? Okay. Thank you. And then after this, what I will ask for C1, is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Okay, thank you.
So this is the same type of question. It's sorry, it's lagging for me. Apologies on that. It's the oversight agency has sufficient staff to support agency operations, and it has this example in there as well of staff, and it's not showing, is it? Apologies.
No.
No, it's not showing.
Apologies for that. Just a moment. Okay. There's the oversight agency has sufficient enough staff to support, or enough staff to support agency operations. There's also these 2 examples here that are, again, sort of in the middle between having 22 staff and 180, which are sort of the other good examples there. And then there's a counterexample about having a police sergeant as staff as well. So the question is whether or not to remove this text.
Okay, and the first, doing it by parts, the first is to remove the word efficient, or you want us to do this first or this title first?
This is basically the same question as the last one, so it might make sense to just kind of
okay,
back to back.
Okay, then my first question is gonna be, the proposal is to remove the last 2 sentences. Correct? Okay. And is there any opposition to remove the last 2 sentences here? They're highlighted. They start in San Diego City and San Diego County. Oh, and we have 1 opposition. Okay. Is there general agreement to the proposed change?
No, I think if there's any opposition, then we don't have consensus, so you can
okay, we need to come. Yeah, you're right.
keep discussing it.
Yeah, we can keep discussing. And Commissioner Monica?
I just, under the same premise of the last one, having different examples of how different places are doing this is helpful for when we are thinking about how we are going to design our system. And which is why I would also support taking out both sufficient and enough out of the title, because we don't know what is sufficient or enough. But we have descriptions of different styles of how they do this in different places.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. Okay. Because of that, my question is going to change again. And what my question is, the suggestion is to keep these two sentences. And is there a strong opposition to the proposed change of keeping these two last sentences? Is there a general agreement to the proposed change to keep these two sentences? Okay. Thank you. We will then go to the title. And my question is there a strong opposition to change the word sufficient for enough? Yes, Commissioner Dan?
Well, I heard Commissioner Arce argue that we should take both sufficient and enough out, same reasons.
Yes.
And I agree with that.
Thank you, you're right. And then my question is there a strong opposition to take both words sufficient and enough out of the title for F5? No. Is there general agreement to the proposed change to take these two words out? Okay, thank you. Then I can ask the other question. Is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Thank you.
So F1, this is sorry, something happened with the screen share. It's supposed to look a little different. I'm trying to figure out the all markup versus none, just a moment. So it is, there are two proposed changes again to this one, trying to resolve a similar thing to what we've discussed 4 examples ago, which is there are 3 examples given, and they are not necessarily supportive of every part of the header. And so the proposed change, there are 2. One is to remove the words up here in the header that say hires, and in some cases hires and fires, and replace it with and in some cases can hire and fire that person. And the other change is to keep that the way it is, but to move San Diego County down, as it is has different, it's the only exception to the rule. So put another way, Oakland has the ability to hire and fire the agency director. Denver has the ability to hire and fire the agency director, although that's not 100% a consensus position. And San Diego does not. It has only the ability to fire that person. So there's a proposal to move San Diego into partial best practices so that the header can remain as it is, as the oversight body can hires, fires, and hires, manages, conducts reviews, and can fire the executive director of the oversight agency. And again, apologies for the screen share here. And perhaps Commissioner Dan or Commissioner Angie, Commissioner Sophia could speak to that.
Commissioner Dunn?
Yeah, no, I mean, if you read the Denver example, it explicitly says that the city council hires the staff. So I think we should just leave San Diego where it is, change the header, and finish the document as soon as we can. Yeah, because I think that it's accurate if you leave San Diego where it was. And I'm not sure about the but cannot independently hire the executive director part. I don't remember that being in the original text.
It's not, that got moved. That's what it said before. Just trying to find it.
Okay, the proposed change by Commissioner Dunn is to leave the San Diego as it is now. And the title, take the words that have been crossed. Okay. Hires and can choose to fire. Okay. Then I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to the proposed change? All the changes. Okay. Is there general agreement to the proposed change? Okay, thank you. Then we can ask the question. For F1, is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? And Christian, you okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay, the next one is G2. This was flagged for further discussion on Monday by Commissioner Simab, and it was the proposed change is to remove the word identified. And there were a couple questions that were identified. Sorry, there are a couple questions that were noted as part of prep for this meeting, and I think might be best to start by posing a question to the person who did the research, which we believe was Commissioner Debbie on Oakland. And if that's accurate, the question was—
It's me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would hypothetically removing the word identified from this sentence still be accurate to what the practice was in Oakland? Like if the word identified was removed, would this still be an accurate statement?
Let me just read the sentence, sorry.
Sorry to put you on the spot like that.
Oh, it's okay, as long as I can read the sentence, that's all. Could follow the cases to understand exactly what the allegations were against. I guess not, I mean, I think that's fine.
Okay, if not, it wouldn't make sense to change it, but there is a proposed change to remove the word identified, and that may or may not resolve the flag that Commissioner Simab and Co-Chair Simab had raised, but yeah.
Okay, can I ask the question then? Okay. Is there a strong opposition to remove the word identify? Is there a general agreement to remove?
I'm being bad here, but I just cut in and say, I wonder if instead we should say involved officers. I don't know what others think about that. It just seems weird just to say plain officers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I can ask the question again.
Commissioner Simab has.
Commissioner Simab, go ahead. Thank you, Yumi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, other suggestion would be to, this does raise the ability to be able to be specific and say, officers identified or unidentified, such as those that were in the rapid response team during the 2020 protests were, 4 times, much of the time unidentified until they're forced to be identified with random numbers. And then later on, those random numbers changed to 2 or 3 digit numbers. And so it was like this juggle, but still like never a cohesion of being able to fully identify an officer. So if there was an officer in that similar position who, like majority of the RR team, committed violent acts against people practicing their First Amendment rights, then yeah, we should say, maybe even say identified, non-identified officers, if we can add language to make it a better recommendation for our IPR board. Sorry, I'm tired, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw Commissioner Monica's.
I know Commissioner Monica and then Commissioner Debbie.
Yeah, I guess the question is whether this is what's happening in Oakland, not what was happening in Portland back then. So I think that's where we have to focus on what we're talking about with regards to Oakland, not Portland. So I totally get what you're saying, Commissioner Sima, but yeah, I guess that's my point. I guess we're talking about Oakland, not Portland, you know?
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. Commissioner Debbie?
And I'm fine again with taking out both words, identified and involved, just generic officers.
Okay. Should I ask to take in the 2 words out? Okay, that will be my question. Is there a strong opposition to taking the 2 words out prior to officers? Is there general agreement to the proposed change of taking the 2 words out? Okay, thank you. And then the question will be, is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Okay, thank you. We can go to the next one.
Okay, so the third to last one is R5. And apologies, just getting the screen share to be accurate here. And this one was flagged for further discussion, but does not have any particular proposed change at this time. And that was flagged earlier today.
Commissioner Dunn?
Yeah, I would just echo what Commissioner Arce just said about the Oakland thing. I mean, this is what they do in, it's off the screen for me, in the city of San Diego. And it possibly will end up being what's in Portland, whether we want it to be or not, but it doesn't mean we agree with it. It just means that that's what the practice is. So I'm hoping we just leave it in there.
Thank you. Any other suggestion, discussions? Okay. Because they're proposed to this, just leave it like it was. I'm gonna ask, is there a strong opposition to, oh no, because if we're not making changes, the question is this a practice that PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so this one's a little bit confusing, and I'll just try and explain it as best as possible. There is a proposal to there's some proposed changes to the text, but there's also a proposal to remove the entire thing and reword it as a practice to avoid. So in 2 cities, there are methods by which officers are able to admit to the complaint and its veracity and prevent an investigation from continuing forward to some degree. There's different rules in New York and in San Diego. And as is mentioned in 2 different places here, this does prevent the civilian oversight body from finding other misconduct that perhaps would have been unearthed during an investigation. And so it was proposed to delete this from this section and add it down at the bottom. And as a new item that is a practice to avoid. And it would say officers accused of misconduct can cut a plea deal with the oversight body, and it would be identified in San Diego County, which is the full practice, that the plea of no contest is binding and prevents investigations from proceeding that may find other misconduct beyond that alleged in the complaint. And then as a partial practice to avoid in New York, that officers can cut a plea deal with the board, and the reason it's partial is, however, the police commissioner can reject the deal and order the board to hold a hearing. So that is the proposed replacement as a practice to avoid.
Is there any discussion? Okay. Commissioner Dan?
Yeah, I just want to see if anybody had an argument in favor. I would oppose this. I like, the breaking the San Diego into 2 parts where the partial problem is identified in the best practice section. This is going on right now in Portland. When we're considering what the new board's going to do, we're going to have to decide whether or not they're going to listen to every single case that comes in front of them. And if there may be a way to speed it up by having officers say, yeah, I did it, just give me my punishment. As long as there's no possibility that there's something being missed, then that might be something that we want the board to do. But we don't know that yet. It's something for us to discuss when we're doing the design. But as such, I would like to leave it in the best practices as something to consider, because it may be a way to help us speed up the process for the poor board members who are probably going to be at meetings until 9:45 p.m. listening to all these cases. So that's my proposal, to leave it in.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Commissioner Sophia?
Yes, I'm thinking about what Commissioner Dan said, and I know in the subcommittee we kind of went through this again and again because there's some really negative points about it. And if it's a practice to avoid, it's still giving us an idea of what the possibilities are, so we can make the changes specific to Portland if we want to. So there's still some things in there that's just negative, and you can't really tease them out. But listing it as a practice to avoid, it still brings it back up in our, as my friend called, brain housing group, to say, this, we didn't quite like it this way, but if we changed it this way, it might work for Portland. So I want to see it in there. I don't want to split hairs about what's best. It's just too hard the way it's written to pick the good stuff out and leave the bad. So just to put it in a practice to avoid. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Then there is 2 proposals, and one to leave it and one to, should I ask? Is this number 7, is there a strong opposition to keep it as a practice to avoid? Okay, yeah, we have a strong opposition, and then we can need to continue, keep discussing. who wants to continue the discussion? Commissioner Faith?
Can we ask if there's strong opposition to keep it in best practices
Okay,
where it currently is?
okay.
And there is a text, this is not the exact text, so if everyone could just take a look before doing that at what it reads up above, because there's a lot here. And if I can ask, I'm not 100% certain whether this can expedite the process language should be redundantly placed or if it makes more sense in one place or the other. It looks like it got moved, it was redundant here and then it got moved up to the top while also remaining here is what it looks like happened, but if anyone would like to speak to that.
You know, I can't remember. I just know in the subcommittee, we went around and around with this one, trying to pick out the good stuff and leave the bad stuff. And that's why the suggestion was the way it was, because the concept of a plea deal, just outright, it makes me cringe. So that's why my whole thought was like, okay, we can't tease out the good stuff because I see good points in it, but the way it's written right there, no, I don't like it. I don't like the idea that allowing plea deals.
Thank you. Commissioner Dunn?
Yeah, well, I would have to go back to my original research to see if that's the exact term that's used in New York, plea deal. I think it is. But to answer staff's question, I think that the pink sentence right underneath the two cities should go away, and the counterexample at the bottom should stay underneath as a counterexample. That would be my way to resolve the question that you raised. Thank you.
Okay, then for the suggestion of the co-chair, Faith, I'm gonna see, is there a strong opposition to the proposed change and to leave there here and to leave the Q11 as a, I mean, keep it here with the changes that are proposed? Is there a strong opposition? Angie has a strong opposition, Commissioner Angie, then we continue with the discussion. Yeah, Commissioner Angie? Oh, Commissioner.
No, sorry, I was lowering my hand.
Okay, Commissioner Monica?
So is cutting a plea deal with the oversight body, is that giving us a bad feeling because it avoids discipline? Or cutting a plea deal does not mean avoiding discipline, right? I mean, the officer is actually admitting to the fact that they have done wrong, and they're still going to get the discipline. So I'm feeling like this actually expedites things, gets the discipline, and the officer is admitting fault when they do so, right?
Thank you, Commissioner, Co-Chair. Commissioner Sima?
Yeah, if they were civilians and not police, then that would be true. But since they are police, oftentimes plea deals reduce them from having to be accountable. There are cases where cops are reduced from being accountable for the proper crime and being accountable for something that was maybe I can't think tonight. It's late, but for other things, for lesser things that actually don't address the true nature of the crime. So these things, that's the potential.
Thank you, Commissioner Sima. Staff? Co-Chair Sophia, I'm sorry.
I was just going to agree because that's the concept. Plea deals allow them to say, oh, well, let's reduce the charge to something smaller. And it never really gets to the meat. It's just the potential for abuse is really high. And I do want to find a way to reduce, the load. But that's why I said I still want it included. I just don't think it's the way it is right now. It's gonna, I don't agree with it.
Thank you. Commissioner Faith?
I guess as we're considering these practices to consider, I mean, my invitation would be for us to decide if this is something we should consider in our system in the future. But right now, we're just deciding factually if this is a practice to consider. And I understand the question is, do we want to consider this or avoid this? But either way, in either place, we could still consider it. And so my invitation is for us to find a resolution post haste.
Thank you. Staff?
Yes, thank you. So there's a series of options here that members of the commission should know about. So obviously you can keep it in the best practices section as it currently is, move it to the practices to avoid as it was originally proposed as well, and still exists down here in this form, which we'll just show so that people can see and read. The other option that is available is there are two others. One is to continue discussing and try to come up with language that works for everyone. And the other is to remove it. And to remove it does not mean that it is not going to be considered. It does not mean that it's not supported or disliked. It simply means that the commission couldn't come to consensus on it. And as a member of the commission has pointed out, it's well after hours, and this is the second to last item on the document. So and that doesn't prevent the commission from adding something in later on this, as was exemplified 2 weeks ago in the late addition of some additional material for the barriers and best practices document, the meeting after it was initially approved. So the 4 options available to the commission, just trying to, in the interest of time, make sure everyone's aware of all of them.
Thank you, staff. And I will pass it to Commissioner Debbie.
So Mr. Hager from the DOJ is in the audience, and they required the city of Portland to incorporate this kind of method into our system. And it might be interesting to ask him why and what it means exactly.
Before we do that, or if we do that, I will ask, commissioners to either continue discussion if they want to continue discussion. Co-Chair Sophia?
I would just put in my hand. I put my hand back down. I understand Commissioner Iona's idea, but this one specifically says plea deal. So I'm just taking the document as it is written. So that's all.
Because what I understand, the research was done on the cities. It wasn't done for the city of Portland. And I don't, yeah, and then everything that you research, we will have to ask in the city of Portland.
Right.
This was done in the city. Okay. Is there any other commissioner that wants a comment? Because this will be asking this person, I don't have any problem, but they will be in the research of Portland, and then we have to change the cities that are there. Unless this person is an expert on the cities you're mentioning in your research. Co-Chair's Faith.
Yeah, thanks for pointing out. Thank you, Jared. I see that your comment is maybe making a comment in public comment, and I think that would be great. And Samir, would you mind going over our 4 options again? And
yes, happy
thank
to. So I'll screen share one more time and thank you, Co-Chair Faith. The original version was written as a best practice, and it was written as Q11. There's some proposed changes to it, so it's possible to maintain it as a best practice. That has already been asked. There was opposition to that, but that could be resolved over further discussion over time. A second option, there was a proposal made to remove it as a best practice and phrase it as a practice to avoid, which is essentially, as you see here, a practice to avoid, number 7, which the text is not identical, but is relatively similar, includes the same 2 examples. The third option that was also asked, and there was also opposition to that, but that could also be resolved by the commission over further discussion over time. The third option is to essentially keep discussing and try to come up with some sort of language that both accurately reflects the practices in place in San Diego County and New York, but also reflects a consensus viewpoint of the commission as to whether or not it's any of it is a good practice or a practice to avoid. The fourth option is to remove it from the document altogether insofar as approving the overall document, and then allow, as always, the commission can revisit the issue and come up with consensus language at a future meeting. As you can see, we did that you did that 2 meetings ago with the best practice, barriers to police accountability and best practices in Portland. That document was approved 3 meetings of the full commission ago, but then 2 meetings ago, full commission co-chairs offered some additional text to add to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner then?
Well, I think if the issue is probably the language in the best practice header, and so since that language was lifted from New York, maybe what we should do is change that language to say the officer can admit to the oversight body that they committed misconduct.
Thank you. You're talking about G.
Yes.
Okay. And is a proposed change? On Q11, I'm sorry.
Could you repeat? I want to make sure I got the right words there, Commissioner.
I just want to say admit to the oversight body.
Admit, is there a...
that they committed misconduct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sophia?
I just want to say that I'm glad I'm not glad we're having a debate, but I'm glad we are thinking about this deeply. I think it's really important. I think that's why we're going back and forth on it, and everybody wants to get it right. So I would just make a suggestion that we could come back to this one particular item, such as the full commission did with the Portland practices to avoid, so we can hammer it down more specifically, and maybe even find other jurisdictions that may have something more close to what we want to agree with. So that's my suggestion, is that we table this one until later so that we can get through the document, because it's already 10 and a lot of us have to be up at 5 to go to work. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Then the question I was asked, is there a strong opposition to what Commissioner Sophia proposed to revisit this in another meeting? Oh, there, yeah, we have a strong opposition. Then we cannot.
I'm sorry, I hear you, Sophia. I just feel like it's possible. I really support Dan's suggestion. I would be happy to approve it with that change.
Okay, let me ask then, is there a strong opposition to leave the Q11 title as Commissioner Dan proposed? Is there general agreement to the proposed change to change the title?
There was strong opposition.
Oh, there was strong opposition, okay.
Sophia, right? Yeah.
Then we continue discussing until we find the right words or, yeah.
Sorry, could the person with strong opposition maybe explain their strong opposition?
Yes, I just did my comment before when I suggested we table it and do a better job at getting it right, because it's still not right. And I think everyone is tired right now. And we don't really have the background information to get it right at this point. We would just be pushing it on to get it over with.
Also, I know, thank you, Commissioner. I know Commissioner Angie, but we need to review one more thing before approving this one. Maybe we can go to review that one and then come back to this.
Sure, take a break. Thank you. Samir, can I ask you to move to the next item?
Yes, yeah, to clarify, just leave it as is and go to the last item.
Yes.
Okay. The last item is the introductory sentence to the entire document. So after the table of contents, there is a definitions table, which has previously been discussed of having staff populate later, as discussed with the definitions and all that. And then there is a sentence here that says, the Police Accountability Commission agrees that the following items are best practices from other jurisdictions. That is the current text and highlighted in red. There are two proposed changes, which we'll put down here below. One is to have the addition of this text. I'm sorry, the text that's in the comment, which we'll post down here. And the other is to keep this, but add the clarification text here. And you can see there's several comments. This just says proposed addition. So I'll try and keep it so that it's all visible. And then regardless, once this is the sentence that just lives right above the beginning of A1. Because there were some references in previous meetings where this came up to how the other documents came up, this sentence is the introductory sentence to the barriers and best practices document. And this sentence is the introductory sentence to the subject matter experts document, just as references. And then there are two proposed changes. So I'll show three different versions of it essentially on screen.
Then the yes, Commissioner Fay.
I don't know that I agree that I have been saying that these are the best practices from other jurisdictions. So I feel pretty uncomfortable with that sentence remaining as it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Monica?
I agree with what Commissioner Faith just said. I also think that this third sentence, having conducted research in June and July, I think that really represents what we're trying to do here. These are the possible best practices. that we are considering in designing Portland's new oversight. That sounds very precise. Precisely what we need to say as an introduction.
Thank you. Then the proposed change is that we keep the first sentence, the Police Accountability Commission agrees to the following items. Or is that a start, or the having conducted research? I'm sorry.
So there's a proposed change to to add this text, and there's a proposed change to replace with this text, and there were other hands up at one point, but
Okay.
not sure.
Thank you. Commissioner Monica?
Yeah, no, I would just replace the text with having conducted research. Just start the whole introduction with having conducted research in June and July, and take all the other ones out. That's what I
Sorry,
would
so
do.
to clarify, you're saying to add that to the beginning of the existing sentence?
No, I think it should just be alone.
Having only. The other, she's proposing only having conduct research, the whole sentence. there.
Yeah, so that's its own proposal, and that's one of the two as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that.
Commissioner Sophia?
I would just like to add the highlighted in yellow to that. And say, you know, having conducted the research, and then go back and add these practices are not recommendations for the police accountability, but will be considered by the PAC. I like putting those two together. I'm just kind of smashing it. But it explains more, I think, is a better understanding of what we're trying to do. You know, if we just take the yellow part and then add it to the bottom of the having conducted paragraph. We're sitting.
Okay, then the proposed change is having conducted research in June, July, the research committee of the Police Accountability Commission present this possible best practice to the full commission for consideration and designing Portland's new oversight system. These practices are no recommendation of the Police Accountability Commission, but will be considered by the PAC as design Portland's new police oversight system. Okay, I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a
Sorry,
strong?
could you?
Yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Could just to hold, you're saying, I want to be 100% sure. This sentence would go at the bottom here. Is that?
Yes, correct.
Okay. It would look like that.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you.
You're welcome. Is there a strong opposition to the proposed change of having the last two sentences suggested as Monica? And is there a strong opposition? Is there general agreement to the proposed change?
Yeah.
Okay. We have the general agreement. Then it's only one, thank you, one more thing. We come back to the other. We have the introduction now. It's one more thing to approve the document.
They don't pay us enough for this.
Facilitator, Victoria, this one needs to have a
Oh, I
question
need,
as a whole.
okay, I need to ask the other question, you're right. Is this a practice the PAC would like to designate as a best practice to consider? No?
Sorry, just it's the other, the question about, is there general agreement about including this in the document?
Okay, sorry. Is there general agreement to include this introduction in the general document? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Only one more. Is there any new suggestions or changes? Yes, Commissioner Fate?
I would like to go back to Sophia's recommendation to come up with better language. I don't feel like we're in a place to resolve this evening.
Okay, I'm gonna ask that question again.
Commissioner Christiana has his hand up as well.
Commissioner, go ahead.
It was nothing big. I'm happy to do what Faith said. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Jumiri. Okay, is there a strong opposition to the proposed that we leave this for another time? Is there a general agreement to leave this last item? I have, before I have question, I see some comments on the chat and I want to make sure that, yes, staff?
So to answer Commissioner Obi's question, that is essentially what would happen here. To approve the whole document while this is tabled would be to not have any text related to plea deals in the document for now, and then to allow the commission to, as you always can, come back with proposals to do it. There's no way to leave it in track changes form in a published approved document. So I would say that's a good way to interpret this question. That there would be a published version of the document that has neither version of the best practice nor practice to avoid in here for now, and then the commission could revisit and fix that by adding in whatever method you choose. Otherwise, there's no real way to publish it without some sort of version on the screen or not on the screen, right? So it can't. So that's the answer to that question. I'll pass it back to the facilitators.
Okay. What would should do then? I'm confused. What will be the question?
I suppose the question would be at that point whether or not there is strong opposition to removing both essentially all the track change text related to plea deals from the document, with and allowing the commission to continue on a full document approval. And if there's general agreement following, if there's no strong opposition.
Thank you. And before we go to the question, Commissioner Dan?
Yeah, well, my understanding of our process is that before we adopt the whole document, we're going to have to take public comment anyway. Mr. Hager has offered to do that. So my suggestion would be to listen to his public comment, see if that helps us come to a resolution on this item, and then go to the discussion about adopting the whole document. I hope that's a reasonable compromise.
Okay. We agree to go to public comment. Okay, let's go to public comment then. I don't have the slides, but
I'm getting them. Just oh, never mind.
Hi there. My name is Jared Hager. He, him pronouns. And I work for the United States Department of Justice, and I represent the United States in a case, United States v. City of Portland, regarding police reform. Commissioner Dan is correct that we do have a provision allowing for stipulated discipline. I do want to make clear as a first point, though, you all are free to do what you want. This is recommendations for the city to make amendments to our settlement agreement, so you are not bound by it. But I do want to explain why it's provision of our settlement agreement and the value that we see in it. Commissioner Dan has mentioned the time. Expeditious discipline is a strong value, a best practice for all accountability systems, and that's for the complainant and for the officer. And there can be a tremendous amount of cases of discipline, especially if you think about a protest situation and force in response. and the system has to work. So there is a value to timeliness. The United States also believes it's the best practice to acknowledge acceptance of responsibility. There is an independent value to that, to not go through an adversarial process, but to admit one's conduct. That has value both for the complainant and for the officer and the chain of command and colleagues. Again, it also creates a time value to the system running effectively and efficiently, especially in cases of high stress in terms of number of force cases, stress on the system. Now, that's a standard practice, in federal criminal law as well, that when someone admits a responsibility, they typically do get some sort of, value in return. They get to resolve their case quicker and not go through an adversarial process, which can be uncomfortable. And so, the federal criminal law respects that too. Now, I've heard some criticisms about how it might avoid responsibility or lessen the discipline impact, and that is certainly a possibility depending on the parameters. To me, that comes down to a situation of whether or not you trust the decision maker. And right now, those types of stipulated discipline can be resolved, I believe, through the chain of command and the chief. And the way I see the proposal being written here, it's acceptance of responsibility that then is determined by the oversight board. And so that is your decision maker. And if you don't trust that decision maker to accept or not accept a statement of responsibility or impose an appropriate discipline, then, I think you have bigger problems, because they're the ones who are going to be resolving your cases, under this new system and executing discipline, as I understand it. So those are important considerations of whether or not that system can be run fairly. And so, Commissioner Sophia, I do take that point, and I just think that comes down to your decision maker. So those are, the things that we, have considered in terms of having it as a part of our settlement agreement. It was an amendment, and it was agreed upon by all sides. So it is in the spirit of compromise that we put that into the settlement agreement too. But it has had, we think, appropriate value, both for the complainants, the officers, and the system to run effectively. So I appreciate you allowing me to have public comment, and I appreciate your service to this. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have based on what I said.
Thank you. Thank you, Jared, for your comment. We really appreciate it. Okay, Commissioner Sophia?
Yes, I appreciate Jared's comments, and our issue is not what Portland does, is what these jurisdictions were suggesting. So I'm not saying that there's no value in it. It's just the way that it's written and the way these jurisdictions have proposed it. I don't think the way it's proposed is a good practice. I do believe that there's some value in it. But right now we're just going based on whatever the research says, and it's not necessarily, like I said, something that we shouldn't consider, but the way it's written, it's not. I don't like it. Still, sorry. I think just my words right now are not there. It's just, I do agree, but that's why I said I think it should be there. And my first comment was just to put it back into the practice to avoid, to make sure we do look at those kind of things, but not necessarily, like we said in our title, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to do it. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Christian?
Thank you. The little thing I was going to say earlier was that I feel, for me, the changing of language at the disclaimer at the beginning of the whole thing kind of does alleviate a little bit of this conversation, because it acknowledges that these are considerations and not hardline things. Sorry, I'm getting tired. I'm hard. I'm discussing talking. And then I was also going to say, would it help at all if we did, whether or not it's in the practice to avoid or the best practices section, if we acknowledge one way or the other that there is, like, for example, if it's in the best practices section, if we say that it's in the best practices section, but there is a lot of debate on whether or not this is actually a best practice, or there's a lot of issues that people have brought up in the past around this, or if alternatively, if it's in practice to avoid section, we say there is some value in this, but we still generally think it's like a should be in this section, because that's what we're talking about, right? Whether or not it should go, that's the main thing, is that we're discussing whether it should go one of the two sections. So I'm wondering if maybe we just acknowledge one way or the other that it's kind of a up in the air thing. I don't know if that's something that might work. Just curious.
Oh,
Angie?
yes, Commissioner Angie.
Thank you. I thank you for the public testimony. I appreciate that. That did clarify some of the information, and I do appreciate that staff put into the comments into the chat what the definition of stipulated discipline is exactly. I feel that the way that it's written now, it's extremely vague, and I also strongly disagree with how it's written now in both places. I think that we do need to strengthen the introductory statement, either if it's going to be in an accepted practice or an accepted disagreed practice. I don't have any words right now either. I've been working all day long. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Angie. Commissioner Debbie?
Wonder if it would make sense to as a compromise, is to put it in both places. There, Mr. Hager gave us, reasons. It's good for the complainant. It's good for the officer. It's good for the system because it expedites things. And so, I mean, the DOJ considers it a best practice. So it could go up there. And then we've also, where we have practices to avoid, we've explained why we think this might not be so great. And then, I don't know, I'm just trying to think a way out of this. And that's my idea for now.
Thank you. I do appreciate everybody trying, but I actually just think.
Okay, then the question is what Commissioner Sophia proposed. Is there a strong opposition to just put this conversation, these items for future discussion?
CMOB? No. He's not. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Dunn?
Well, the staff has introduced the concept that by doing that this document is going to be published without a mention of this at all. So does that mean we're going to revisit it at our next meeting like we did with the Portland document? Or does it mean we're tabling it and then maybe someday down the line we'll get back to it? Because I need to know that to understand how to respond to the question.
Thank you, Commissioner Dunn. Staff?
That is a good question, and one that the commission does not, automatically have an answer to. It's not currently, on the agenda for next week. It could be added to that. I'll note that the commission doesn't yet have co-chairs for the next phase of work to set the agenda for the next meeting beyond what's already confirmed in terms of the briefing with the authors of the charter amendment. So there's a little bit of a confusion there. However, you could very easily say right now in your vote that you'd like it to be on that and so perhaps as a suggestion to commissioner, or actually as a suggestion to facilitators to ask if to frame the question as to table the discussion and frame it the way we framed it, where if there's a proposed change, it's on the agenda for next week, kind of like how the commission revisited its community engagement framework. It was on the agenda. If someone had made a proposal to fix it, it would be discussed and that proposal would be voted on at next week's meeting. I'm seeing some thumbs up there. So if maybe that's the right way to frame the question, perhaps Victoria and I maybe.
Yes, I don't know how to frame the questions. If you can frame.
So would you mind if I asked it?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Is there any strong opposition to tabling the conversation about Q11 or practice to avoid number 7 from today's discussion and adding it as an agenda item for next week to have, if anyone proposes, revised text for it? Question mark. Seeing none.
No strong opposition.
Yeah, seeing none, is their general agreement to that proposal?
Looks like we have agreement.
General agreement, yes.
Okay, so then I'll pass it back to the facilitators to do the full document approval, because that is the last flagged item in the document.
Okay, now the question is, go all those in support of approving this document, please raise their hands.
I'm sorry, but does the commission feel that they've taken public comment on the decision on whether or not to approve it? That, yeah, there's the public comment, and then also the values and goals review. Apologies.
Okay, let's go to the public comment. And we're gonna take public comment. We invite people to participate. We just remind them that we keep public comment for 2 minutes. Please raise your hand if you want to participate. And we have Jared, please.
My name is Jared Hager. I want to give a public comment as a citizen of Portland. I live in Park Grove's neighborhood. I grew up here. I thought Commissioner Debbie's idea was really brilliant to put it in both so that you can move forward. And I just thought that was a nice way to compromise and account for everybody's position in a way that I thought was just really good. I wanted to compliment. I'm continually impressed with Commissioner Debbie. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jared. Anybody else? Okay, I have another participant. Darian, please, welcome. Darian, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and I'm sorry about that, but if you can make, please, your comment.
Yes, some people are nodding. I just want to acknowledge and appreciate the work of the PAC in moving all of these recommendations and things forward. I know it's been a long journey and just wanted to highlight that. Thank you for your work, and that's my only comment, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, for your words. Do we have additional public comment? No? Okay, thank you very much.
So the next item, when the commission approved its values and goals on March 24th, it discussed reviewing them prior to any substantive decision ever made by the PAC. So we'll do this briefly and then move to the question of whether or not to approve the document. PAC approved values and goals. There are 6 values: equity and inclusion, anti-racism, harm reduction, transparency and trustworthiness, community-centered, and effectiveness. For each, there is the value listed as well as specific goals that the actions of the commission should maintain. And then with relation to the eventual recommendations, noting that this is not yet a vote on a recommendation or even a part of the recommendation, but eventually those recommendations will need to be compared against the considerations and success criteria here. This is 2.5 pages of this, so I'll just quickly leave this on for a moment for everyone to read it, scroll, and then stop the screen share.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then I'm gonna ask the question, is there a strong opposition to approving this document as the PAC areas of agreement on best practices and practices to avoid from other jurisdictions? Is there general agreement to approving this document as the PAC areas of agreement on best practices and practices to avoid from other jurisdictions? Then the document is approved. Yay.
Great.
Congratulations. Okay. I think we need to close the meeting, or there's a next step stuff or anything you need to add?
There might be. So next on the agenda is next steps, and under that is approval of full commission co-chairs. We talked to the current co-chairs about how to manage this process, and got some very recent guidance from the city attorney's office on it, and so this is a maybe question. There were 4 candidates who and gave their indication that they were interested in being co-chairs. In the event that there are more than 3, because there are 3 positions, the Police Accountability Commission will need to conduct a vote, and that vote would be public. And by that, doesn't mean that the vote would necessarily be taken in public, but it would mean that who each commissioner voted for would be listed out publicly. And there were some concerns about that. So this is essentially an opportunity to say, unless there's any changes to the candidate pool at this point, that the current co-chairs determined that we would follow the guidance allowed by city attorneys to take a vote using an electronic ballot over the next week, and then announce the outcomes at the meeting on October 27th. So just to clarify, that's if they're that's essentially how an election, or an approval, I should say, of a subset of candidates that is smaller than the overall pool would work. So just wanted to flag that, make sure people knew, and that's why there's not necessarily going to be co-chairs right this second for the powers and duties phase. Any questions on that, or Commissioner Dan?
Well, when you announced at a previous meeting that we had 2 people who were nominated, I put my name in as a potential co-chair. I understand that Commissioner Amici has put her or their name into the running as well. So if Commissioner Amici would like to be a co-chair, I'm not going to force us into doing a vote. Perhaps Commissioner Amici can explain their desires, and I can step down.
So in the event that, just to clarify, that there were to be that, it would need to be all 4 or all 3, depending on the situation, saying that. So there wouldn't just be one potential candidate. It would also involve Christian and Tirsa doing the same, and potentially yourself as well, Commissioner Dan. So just to clarify, we got some guidance, and we're kind of scrambling a little bit because it came in relatively late, and I apologize for that, on what the legal requirements are. So that's totally fine if that's the approach anyone would like to take. I don't know if what you're saying is that you would stand aside at this point, or if you're saying that you would need to hear from others. I don't want to overstate what you're saying.
I just wanted to hear Commissioner Amici's opinion about what I just said, and then I'm happy to stand aside once I hear that. Yes, thank you.
Attorney Ames has raised her hand.
Go ahead, Attorney Ames. Sir,
And I believe she needs to be promoted.
Already done.
Yeah. Sarah Ames, do you wanna comment?
Yeah, I think it's on her side. She's already been promoted. I think she's trying to.
Really sorry to be holding you up. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now.
I'm sorry. There was, I think, something lost in translation in something Samir said, translating the late breaking, advice that I gave him today. But I think Dan's solution, that if he, hears why the other commissioner is interested, that he would step down, would be an easy solution. So move forward.
Thank you, Attorney.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to speak to this. Yeah, I think that being a co-chair would be a good experience for me. And I also, I think I have the time and the energy and the enthusiasm to, get into the nitty gritty of it. So I appreciate, yeah, Dan, I appreciate you stepping down if you choose to do so. And I'm happy to be. Thanks.
Thank you. Congratulations. And Commissioner.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm removing my name from consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just to clarify next steps on this process, when there are 3 candidates for 3 positions, there would at some point need to be a motion to approve. To clarify the co-chair, I'm not going to go through everything because this is the 3rd time we're doing it, but the co-chair's description is in the bylaws and the internal processes as well. So please refer to that at some point, and won't take up your time reading that out loud right now. But if there is any motion, then I'll I'll pass it to co-chair Faith. Thank you.
I move to approve Commissioner Ajay, Commissioner Tirsa, Commissioner Christian for approval of the next phase of co-chairs.
Okay. Is there any strong opposition to the approval of Commissioner Ajay, Commissioner Christian, Commissioner Tirsa as co-chairs for the powers and duties phase of the Police Accountability Commission? Is there general agreement to doing so? Congratulations to you all. And now I'll pass it back to facilitators to continue on. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And then we just need to adjourn the meeting. If I can have the last slide, please.
Okay. Oh.
And while we wait for that to get figured out, if we can just say thank you to co-chairs Faith, Lavisa, and Seema. This will, now that this document has been approved, this is the last meeting of the fact-finding phase, and their term is over. So as co-chairs, this phase was a long one, and they did an amazing job. Thank you also to co-chairs Sophia and Angie of the Subcommittee on Research, and to co-chairs Tirsa and Christian of the Subcommittee on Community Engagement Events, but in particular to the full commission co-chairs for all of your work. And congratulations to all of the commission.
Thank you. Thank you to all the members who attended today's meeting and for your contributions today. Thank you also to the interpreters supporting access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and Ipsos Committee for all Portlanders. Thank you to all the people who participated from the public and their comments. Finally, thank you for all the commissioners for their work and also for approving the document. We adjourn this meeting, this public meeting, on 10:40 p.m. Thank you.